Ryan had been an ER nurse for 9 years when this happened. He worked at a level 1 trauma center in central Tennessee. Big hospital, busy ER, the kind of place that never fully goes quiet even at 3 in the morning. He'd seen everything by that point. Overdoses, gunshot wounds, cardiac arrests, the full spectrum of human emergency. He was not a person who got rattled easily. 9 years in a trauma ER either breaks you in the first 2 years, or it builds something in you that's difficult to shake. He told me this happened on a Thursday night shift in late January. The ER had been slammed all evening. Bad weather, a multi-car accident on the interstate, the usual winter respiratory cases stacking up in the waiting room. By around 1 a.m., things had finally started to thin out. Not quiet, it never gets fully quiet, but manageable. The kind of lull where you can actually breathe for a few minutes before the next wave hits. Bay 4 was one of the standard treatment bays on the south end of the ER. Curtained on 3 sides, monitor on the wall, standard setup. They'd had a patient in there earlier in the evening, elderly man, chest pain, had been admitted upstairs around 11 p.m. After he was transferred, the bay had been cleaned, stripped, restocked. Empty bed, fresh paper on the mattress, clean, standard turnover. Ryan was doing his walkthrough around 1:15, checking the bays, making sure everything was stocked and ready. He pulled back the curtain on Bay 4 to do his check. The bed was occupied. A man was lying in it, flat on his back, on top of the covers, fully clothed in street clothes. Dark jacket, jeans, work boots, eyes open, staring straight up at the ceiling. Ryan's immediate thought was that someone had wandered in from the waiting room. It happened occasionally. Patients who got tired of waiting and went looking for somewhere to lie down. He stepped into the bay and said, "Hey there, sir, you can't be in here. Let me get you back to the waiting area." The man didn't respond, didn't look at him, just kept staring at the ceiling. Ryan stepped closer and put his hand on the man's arm. He said the temperature was the first thing. The man's arm through the jacket sleeve was cold. Not cool the way someone feels when they've been sitting in an air-conditioned waiting room. Cold the way something feels when it has not had warmth in it for some time.
He said the man's name, sir, loudly. Nothing. He looked at the man's chest for the rise and fall of breathing. He couldn't see any. He immediately hit the call button on the wall and called for a second nurse. He grabbed his pen light and leaned over the man's face to check pupils. The man's eyes were open and fixed, staring at the ceiling, and they did not react to the pen light at all. His colleague Sarah came around the curtain within 30 seconds. Ryan told her to call the code and reached for the man's wrist to check for a pulse. There was one. Faint and slow and irregular, but there. The man was alive. They got the crash cart in, got monitors on him, got the attending physician there in under 2 minutes. The man's vitals were dangerously low. Heart rate in the 30s, blood pressure barely registering, temperature 94 degrees. Full workup was ordered, IV access established. The whole emergency response machine kicked into gear. The man never responded to any of it. Never spoke, never moved, eyes open the entire time, fixed on the ceiling. He survived. He was admitted to the ICU that night, and Ryan didn't hear the full outcome, but was told by a colleague the next week that the man had regained consciousness 2 days later. But here is the part that Ryan cannot account for. Here is the part that he told me he thinks about on quiet nights when the ER slows down and he finds himself walking past Bay 4. When they went through the man's pockets for identification, standard procedure for unresponsive patients, they found a wallet. Tennessee ID, some cash, a gas station receipt. The receipt was dated that day. The gas station was 11 miles from the hospital, but the hospital had no record of the man being brought in. No ambulance call, no walk-in registration, no record in the system of him entering the building that night. The waiting room log, which recorded every patient who came through the front doors, had no entry for him. Security reviewed the camera footage at every entrance for the 3-hour window before Ryan found him. He did not appear on a single camera. Ryan said the charge nurse, a woman who had been in that ER for over 20 years, looked at the security report and then looked at Ryan and said very quietly, "This happens here sometimes." Ryan asked what she meant. She said, "Some of them find their way in on their own." She walked away and never brought it up again. Ryan has been back in Bay 4 thousands of times since that night. He does his job. He takes care of his patients. He is good at what he does, and he knows it. But every time he pulls back that curtain, he takes 1/2 second longer than he used to before he looks at the bed, just to prepare himself for what might be lying there.
This one comes from a woman named Dana. She has been an ER nurse for 14 years, currently working at a large regional hospital in western Pennsylvania. She sent this in after a lot of hesitation. She said she has never told this story to anyone outside of the 2 colleagues who were there that night. And even with them, it gets brought up only occasionally, and always quietly, and always with the mutual understanding that none of them have a satisfying explanation for it. This happened about 4 years ago on a Saturday night shift in October. The ER at this particular hospital had a wing designated C Wing, a longer corridor of treatment rooms off the main ER floor, used for lower acuity patients who still needed monitoring but weren't critical. Overnight on weekends, C Wing could get backed up, patients waiting hours for beds to open upstairs. It was a normal part of the flow. At the far end of C Wing, past the last treatment room, was a short dead-end corridor about 15 feet long. It led to a supply room on the left and a locked utility door at the end. There were no patient areas down there. Staff used it occasionally to access the supply room. Otherwise, it was just a dead end under a single fluorescent light. Dana was working C-Wing that night with a colleague named Brenda. Around 2:30 a.m., the wing had calmed down enough that both of them were at the nursing station doing charting. The corridor was quiet, most patients sleeping. Dana looked up from her computer. At the far end of C-Wing, at the entrance to that dead-end corridor, a woman was standing. She was facing away from Dana, facing down the dead-end hallway toward the supply room and the locked utility door. She was wearing a hospital gown, white hair, slight build, elderly. Just standing there at the entrance to the dead end, not moving. Dana assumed it was a patient who had gotten out of bed and wandered. It happened all the time, especially with older patients overnight. She got up and walked down C-Wing toward the woman. As she got closer, she called out gently, "Ma'am, let me help you get back to your room." The woman did not turn around. Dana reached her and put a hand gently on her shoulder. She said the woman was ice cold through the thin hospital gown. She said, "Ma'am," again, right beside her now. The woman turned her head slowly to look at Dana. Dana described her face as deeply wrong in a way she cannot fully put into words even now, 4 years later. She said it was not disfigured, not injured. It was the eyes. She said the woman's eyes were the eyes of someone who was not fully there. Not confused the way a disoriented patient looks confused. Something else. Something behind them, or rather, the complete absence of something that should have been there. the woman said one thing to Dana. She said, "I have been waiting a long time." Dana asked her name and what room she was in. The woman turned back to face the dead-end hallway and did not say anything else. Dana called back to Brenda to come help her and turned to guide the woman back toward the rooms. The hallway behind her was empty. She spun around. The dead-end corridor was empty. Supply room door closed and locked as always. Utility door at the end closed and locked. Nowhere to go. She had been standing right next to the woman. She had not heard a single footstep. Brenda came down the hallway and found Dana standing alone at the dead end. They checked every room in C Wing. They checked the supply room. They checked the main ER. They asked every staff member on the floor. Nobody had seen the woman. No patient in C Wing that night matched the description. White hair, elderly, slight build. They checked the patient board. Nobody unaccounted for. The charge nurse on duty that night pulled Dana aside an hour later. She asked her to describe exactly what she had seen, and Dana did, in detail. The charge nurse listened to all of it without interrupting. When Dana finished, the charge nurse said, "What did she say to you exactly?" Dana told her, "I have been waiting a long time." The charge nurse was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "A woman died in this wing about 6 years ago. She waited 11 hours for a bed. She coded in one of these rooms." She paused. Her family said she had white hair, slight build. Dana asked which room. The charge nurse pointed to the room closest to the dead-end hallway. Dana finished her shift. She has worked that hospital for 4 years since. She has never gone to the far end of C Wing alone at night. And every time she passes that dead-end hallway, she does not look down it, because she is afraid the woman will still be standing there, still waiting. This is the one that stays with me. Out of everything I have heard from nurses and hospital workers over the years, this is the one I keep returning to. Not because of anything dramatic that happened, not because of anything violent or sudden, but because of the specific, quiet, impossible thing at the center of it, and the way it unfolded so slowly and so calmly that the person it happened to almost didn't realize what she was experiencing until it was already over. This comes from a woman named Carol. She is 51 years old, has been an ER nurse for 22 years, currently working at a mid-sized hospital in central Ohio. She is measured, precise, not given to exaggeration. She told me this story in a very matter-of-fact way, the way someone talks about something they have accepted, even though they have never understood it. This happened 7 years ago on a Wednesday night shift in March. A man was brought in by ambulance around 11 p.m. His name was Gerald. He was 67 years old, brought in for chest pain and shortness of breath. He was conscious and alert when he arrived, talking clearly, answering questions. Slightly anxious the way most people are when they arrive at an ER by ambulance, but cognitively sharp. No confusion, no altered mental status. He told Carol his medical history clearly and completely, listed his medications from memory, told her the exact time his symptoms had started. He was assigned to a treatment bay, EKG done, labs drawn, IV started. The attending physician saw him within 20 minutes. The initial workup looked concerning. EKG changes that warranted monitoring, troponin levels being checked, a cardiology consult ordered. Carol was his primary nurse. She checked on him regularly through the night as his workup continued. Around 1:30 a.m., she went in to check his vitals and update him on where things stood with his results. He was lying back in the bed, calmer than when he'd arrived. She told him the cardiologist had been paged and would be down to see him, that they were being thorough, that he was in the right place. He nodded. Then he said something that stopped her. He said, "I know I'm not going home tonight." She assumed he meant he was going to be admitted. She told him yes, it was very likely they would want to keep him overnight for observation, that it wasn't unusual given his EKG findings. He shook his head slowly. He said, "No, I mean I'm not going home." She looked at him. He was calm, completely calm, not anxious, not tearful, not the way people get when they are frightened about a diagnosis. Just calm and certain in a way that was different from anything she could attribute to normal patient anxiety. She asked him what he meant. He said, "I've been feeling it all day. Something settling. I know what it is. I just want you to know I'm not scared. I want someone to know that." She didn't know what to say. She told him his vitals were stable, that the team was watching him closely, that he was going to be well taken care of. He smiled at her and said, "I know. You're very good at what you do." She finished her check and went back to the nursing station. She stood there for a moment and then went and found the attending physician and told him what the patient had said. The physician went in to speak with Gerald. He came back and told Carol that the patient was alert and oriented, denied any suicidal ideation, denied being told anything specific by a doctor about his prognosis. He seemed calm and appropriate. The physician attributed it to health anxiety, which was common in cardiac patients.
At 2:47 a.m., Gerald's monitor alarmed. Carol was in the bay within 45 seconds. He had gone into ventricular fibrillation, a fatal arrhythmia if not corrected immediately. The code team was called, the crash cart used, every intervention available deployed without hesitation. They worked on Gerald for 31 minutes. He did not survive. Carol has been an ER nurse for 22 years. She has lost patients before, and she will lose patients again. She knows that death is part of this job in a way that most people who do not work in medicine do not fully understand. She has made peace with that over 2 decades in ways that take time and experience and a particular kind of quiet acceptance. But she told me that in 22 years, she has never had another patient tell her they were going to die that night and be right. She said what she thinks about most is not the medical event itself. It's the hour before it. The way he was calm. The way he said he had been feeling it all day, something settling. The way he said he just wanted someone to know he wasn't scared. She said she thinks about the fact that he knew, not suspected, not feared, knew. She said in this job you get very good at reading people. You spend enough years in an emergency room and you develop instincts that are hard to explain. You walk into a room and before you have seen a single vital sign or lab result, something tells you this one is fine or this one is not. She has learned to trust those instincts because they are built on thousands of patient encounters over 2 decades. She said Gerald had something like that, turned inward, trained on himself. She said the last thing he said to her when she came back to check on him that final time, just before the alarm, was simple. He looked at her when she came in and he said, "Thank you for being here tonight." She said she told him, of course, that she would be right outside. He nodded and closed his eyes. She has never forgotten him. She told me she thinks about him on quiet nights, on the long overnight stretches when the ER slows down and the fluorescent lights hum,
and there is nothing to do but wait for whatever comes next through those doors. She said she hopes wherever he went, he found what he was looking for. And she said she hopes that when her own time comes, she has even a fraction of the calm that Gerald had in that bay at 2 a.m. on a Wednesday night in March, knowing what was coming and not being afraid. 3 nurses, 3 different hospitals, 3 nights that none of them will ever fully put down. I'll see you in the next one.